about the cash flow. So come on and get this money, man.
Hi, I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy, and today I'm going to be looking at the 7 sources of information for investigators. Now, it does not matter whether you're a police officer, a military police person, a government investigator, a private investigator, or any other form of investigator. You might be a workplace investigator or an accident investigator. It doesn't matter. There are 7 basic sources of information available to investigators. Now, this goes right through from an accident investigation involving a splinter in a finger to a police murder investigation. These are the sources of information available to you as an investigator. The first one is a search of the scene of the incident, accident, occurrence, event or crime. Now, naturally, if something happens and it's worth investigating, it's going to have happened at a place. Now, if it didn't happen at a place, then it may not have happened at all. So if it's going to be investigated, it had to happen somewhere. Did it happen on the football field? Did it happen at work? Did it happen at the train station? Where did the incident, occurrence, accident or event happen? What was the exact place that it happened at? That's the first point. So when you go to the scene of an accident, incident or occurrence, have a look around. See what you can see. What's the surface like? Could a person slip or fall or trip there? Is it dangerous? Have a look up. Is there CCTV of the area that you might be able to obtain? Look around. Are there next door neighbours who may be able to assist you with your inquiry? If it happened in a shopping centre, are there adjoining shops or shops opposite where someone may have witnessed what happened? Search of the scene is imperative, and it gives the investigator a starting point to build the foundation of the factual investigation on. The next part of an investigation is examination of exhibits. Now, technically, something doesn't become an exhibit until it's accepted in court, but you will be gathering those things as you go along. Now, I've had some interesting ones over my time. They have ranged from a wheel that fell off the back of a ute and caused an accident involving 3 cars behind it. It was on a hill, and that wheel was basically the spare tyre on a load of pig food on the back of the ute. So that became an exhibit accepted by the tribunal when I had to go and present that. I have had a person who had an accident in a shower at a motel, and that person sued the motel. So the shower screen, which fell apart and was rusty at the time, was an exhibit in my investigation. So it's not always a knife, a smoking gun, or a murder weapon or something like that. It could be an email. It could be a meme posted on the internet. So you might get copies of those exhibits to use in your investigation. You're constantly searching for them. As investigators today, probably the most numerous exhibit that you will obtain will be documents, and those documents could be anything. They could be the person's work history. They could be the person's medical history or leave history or pay history. They could be instructions given to the person and signed by the person that they'd received those instructions. Could be an offensive email, who knows. The next thing that we use as a source of information as investigators, which is a standard across all investigations, is interviews of witnesses. Now, the witnesses who were there at the time saw the accident, incident or event occur. It happened right in front of them. Now, if it was a particularly tragic event, they will have no problem remembering that because it will replay in their mind as they tell you about it, because it's not every day that the normal person who witnesses something sees a tragic event. It's a once in a lifetime thing for a lot of people. Even industrial workers who work in factories and stuff like that with moving machinery, if they witnessed an accident where a person put their hand into some unguarded moving conveyor belt apparatus or something similar, they will remember it very well. So you go and talk to those people and you establish what they know and you take a statement from those witnesses. So that's 3. The next thing that we have as investigators available to us is information received. Now, basically, going back to your school days, this is what they call a dob-in. So someone provides to an authority information about somebody else. Drug dealers do it all the time to dob in other drug dealers. Real estate agents do it all the time to dob in other real estate agents who are doing the wrong thing. So people provide information to regulators or authorities or whatever, and that information comes in by the email or anonymous letter or however it comes through a internal reporting system or something like that. And that information received will give a guide to the investigator of who they can go to, who they might have to talk, who might be available as a witness. So information received is something that we all use, whether we find it deliberately, it's given to us, or we find it by accident through our research or whatever. It's something that's available to us as a source of information for an investigator. The next one is inspection of official records. Now, I had an investigation once where a young 3-year-old girl injured herself at a cemetery. Now, she was climbing on top of a headstone, and the headstone had been there since the early 1960s, and it fell over and broke the little girl's leg. Now, this was before the days of the internet. Now, I couldn't get on Google and find out whose grave it was or whether that person had any relatives and they were negligent in not looking after that grave because it toppled over and hurt this young girl who was climbing on it. I couldn't do that, so I had to go to the library. And I went to the library and I looked up old newspapers on microfiche film that's kept by all libraries, which isn't on Google yet. Still today in 2018, moving into 2019, it's still there. So I went and had a look at it and I found the death notices of that person who died in the paper. And I found that they had no living relatives who could be sued by the parents of the young girl to get back their medical expenses as a result of that headstone falling over. So inspection official records might even be going to company searches. It may go to searches, ASIC, that sort of thing on the internet. You might go to the council and see who the landowner is, do a search there. There are all sorts of searches of official records that you can do as an investigator. The next source of information available to investigators, it's used extensively throughout the investigation world, is surveillance. Now, every single one of us, if we go to the shopping centre or we go to the swimming pool or we go to an event, there are CCTV cameras. We catch public transport, get in a taxi or a Uber. There are CCTV cameras there. They're a safety thing in the environment we live in today. So we're constantly under surveillance. However, people who claim something, they're injured or they can't do this or they're terrified of going out into the world because they've got agoraphobia as a result of the bullying they had at work, they can be put under surveillance to see what their behaviour is like or what the extent of their injury actually is. Now, to get put under surveillance, there is a lengthy process that has to be gone through of approval for it, because it has to be done in appropriate circumstances. You just can't put someone on a whim under surveillance. So people are put under surveillance to see if they are stealing from their workplace, to see if they really have got the injury they say they have, to see if they're working in the place that they're supposed to be working and not working somewhere else and claiming that they're working here. So surveillance is used extensively as a source of information for investigators. The last one is the interview of the suspect or the claimant or the person making the claim or the person thought to be responsible for whatever happened. Now, in this circumstance, it's a record of interview. The person is given a single question and they give a single answer back. An example might be, what is your occupation? They would answer, I'm a dry cleaner. That's how a record of interview goes. Before the record of interview, they are warned about their rights in relation to the matter, in relation to who is interviewing them, that they do not have to say anything. It's all in a script that's given to you as the investigator to read. And at the end, you can ask them if they're happy with the way the interview was conducted and if they have any complaints about the interview or if they have any more information that they'd like to give you, the investigator. So it's a very formal interview. And it's a great skill to have as an investigator to find out information. So there you have it, the 7 sources of information available to everybody. Search of the scene, examination of exhibits, interviewing of witnesses, information received, inspection of official records, surveillance, and interview of the suspect or person of interest. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Hi, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy again, and today I'm going to look at a very interesting subject, the top 10 cliches that you hear in investigation training. One of the big complaints I often hear about investigation training courses for Certificate 3 in Investigative Services or Certificate 4 in Government Investigation as I travel around the country is, oh yes, we engaged these people years ago and their trainers came along and all they did was tell war stories about being in the police. We didn't learn anything. Well, that's not uncommon. But sometimes there's a bit of value in what they teach in some of those programs. So today I'm going to look at the top 10 cliches you'll hear in investigation training in Australia. We'll start at number 10. In investigation work, if you don't learn something new every day, you're not doing your job properly. And that is true. As an investigator, you'll actually learn 3 new things every day. It makes life really interesting in your work role. Number 9. People do admit to things that they did not do. Therefore, a confession is a good start to an investigation. Now that's standard Victoria Police Detective Training School talk. But they're right, people do admit to things they didn't do, so if someone confesses to something, you must corroborate it. Number 3 in our top 10 cliches in investigations is look at the flowers and search for the coffins. Now again, this is Victoria Police Detective Training School, and what they're saying here is someone going to lie to you. They're giving you a big bunch of beautiful flowers. That's their lie. You've got to search back between those flowers and look for the coffins hidden behind them. That's where the crime is. Number 7, you're only as good as your last investigation. Now this is one you'll hear prolifically all throughout Australia for surveillance investigators and factual investigators who brag about how good they are all the time. Trust me, that's the leveller. They're only as good as their last investigation. Number 6, some actually very wise advice. Get emotion out of it. When you go out and interview someone about their accident, incident or occurrence, make sure you stick to the facts. Keep that emotion out of it. Number 5, it's more of a formula rather than a cliche, but it goes like this. Motive plus opportunity minus constraints equals crime. Use that one in all your fraud investigations. Number 4, a confession without corroboration is not worth the paper it's written on. If someone confesses to something, you've got to corroborate what they told you to ensure that they did actually do it. Number 3, The vast majority of investigations are solved as a result of painstaking investigations with perhaps a little luck. Now, this is very true. You can investigate to your heart's content, this, that, or whatever, and the final piece just doesn't fit into the puzzle. Then one day, just by accident, you meet the right person with that connecting piece, or you see something that matches what you're looking for, you're inspired, there it is, you've had some luck. If you have luck in investigations, you don't have to justify it, just take it. One of my personal favourites, and once again it's straight out of detective training school in Victoria, is a failure to seek is a failure to find. A failure to ask is a failure to proceed. I employ a lot of investigators, and I know a good investigator when I'm interacting with them because they are trying to find out. They're not giving me a bunch of excuses why they can't do it. They're failing to seek, they're failing to ask, and they're failing to proceed. What I want is an investigator that looks for the way in, not for the way out. So keep that one in mind. It's really good advice. Our second last one. The last one, probably the top cliche in investigation training in Australia, is the shortest note outlasts the longest memory. Now, you must apply this in your investigation work every day. Make notes of what you do. Finally, there is always one more. And it goes like this. Once again, straight out of detective training school in Victoria. Investigations are 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. So what that means is investigations are hard work, going out, knocking on doors, speaking to witnesses, speaking to subjects, speaking to claimants, speaking to whoever you have to talk to, the HR managers, finding the witnesses who saw it at the time and time has passed since then, and putting together what happened in a factual chronological order. It's hard work 99% of the time, and 1% of the time you'll get that little piece of inspiration that just helps you come to a conclusion on that investigation. And in my next video, I'm going to show you an example of that. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security. Hi investigators, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. It's the end of the week, it's Friday, so we're looking at a roundup of what's been happening in the investigation industry in Australia this week. So first of all, we've had a bit of news on the Gold Coast in relation to Window Tint and what's legal. So we've had a lawyer in Queensland get himself into strife. Let's find out all about it as reported in the Gold Coast Bulletin.
A Gold Coast lawyer has been fined $200 because his car's tinted windows were too dark. Blake Fraser's car windows were very dark and the luminosity was at the lowest level when he was pulled over by police on the 2nd of July. The Southport Magistrates Court heard he was given an infringement about a month earlier but continued to drive. Prosecutor Sarah Clem said the tint was so dark the visibility was a safety issue. On Wednesday, Fraser pleaded guilty to a charge of vehicle equipment not compliant with vehicle standards, which carries a maximum penalty of a $2,669 fine. The on-the-spot ticket offence costs just $133. The court heard the matter was listed for trial, however Fraser changed his plea 2 days before it was supposed to start. Defence solicitor Ash Kante, of Ash Kante Lawyers, said Fraser was first pulled over on the first occasion and police took issue with his number plate, wheels and window tint. Mr. Tay said he ordered a new number plate, changed his tyres, but failed to address the tinting before he was pulled over again. He said Fraser had a lot going on in his life at that time. He took all of the burdens of his home, his father was extremely unwell, and he did his level best to try and get those windows changed. He argued Fraser should be discharged of the charge and ordered to donate up to $1,000 to the Children's Hospital for the Queensland Traffic Offender Program. What's the point, really? of him paying for a traffic offence, where he tried his level best to fix it, Mr. Tay said. Outside of court, Mr. Tay said Fraser had made an appointment with a tinting business, but they had cancelled on him. He didn't blatantly disregard the direction he was given. It was really out of his hands, and that can be seen through him doing all of the other things, which are much harder, he said. He said Fraser wanted to take the matter to trial so he could explain his story. Magistrate Michelle duly ordered Fraser pay summons costs and fined him $200 with no conviction recorded. Outside of court, Mr. Tay said the fine was unfair, especially since he could have given the money elsewhere. It wasn't a matter of money, it was a matter of principle, and that's why he offered $1,000 donation to the Children's Hospital or to a traffic offenders program, and that would have been a proper use of funds rather than just a fine, he said.
Well, that's how it played out at the Gold Coast Bulletin. I hope those Queensland Police Rego Nazis don't ever see my golf buggy number plate. Oh boy, that's going to be trouble if they do. So in other industry news this week, tragic set of circumstances down in Tasmania for insurance investigation. Looks like that's not going to work on me. Let's try again. Oh, I've got to give up. Put it in the wrong one. So in Tasmania this week, Mark Gordon Bird was sentenced to 4 years in prison for burning down 2 of his houses and a combi van and claiming the insurance for it. Now, he did this over a period of time, different times, different houses in different locations, and he will be serving, he was sentenced to 4 years in Risdon Prison, where he has to serve half of that. He's a father. He is an ex-soldier. He served in East Timor, and he has post-traumatic stress disorder. What you don't see in the newspaper report, tragically, in 2010, he came home one day and he found his wife hanging in the garage. She'd hung herself and committed suicide. So there's been an extremely tragic set of circumstances here, and the magistrate in her findings was very fair, and Mr. Bird is being left with a debt for the combi and a very large debt to an insurer for over $500,000 for the house he burnt down. The judge said in her summary that it doesn't look like there'd be any likelihood of him ever paying that back. No winners in this one. It was insurance fraud. For those of you that don't know, the maximum penalty for insurance fraud in Australia is 14 years in prison. That's the maximum penalty. So he's got 3 cases there. He could have been looking at 3 lots of 14 years in prison had they read the Riot Act to him. But they didn't do that. I don't even think they were even contemplating seeking that. But Mr. Bird's got himself into real trouble there with some bad decisions. Young family, very sad set of circumstances. Definitely no winners in that case. With much better news in Tasmania, M&A Investigations are seeking investigators down there. M&A Investigations are one of the biggest investigation firms in Australia, and they're looking for a workers' compensation investigator in Hobart, and they're paying $65 an hour. So if you live in Tassie, you're a licensed private investigator and you're an Australian Security Academy graduate student, I'll put you in touch with M&A Investigations. Just flick me an email and let's get working for M&A. They're probably the 3rd biggest investigation agency in Australia. And outside of the people that work for them, not many people have ever heard of M&A Investigations. That's just how you like it as a private investigator agency. So that's a good thing. Further to that, we have another vacancy in Victoria this week. And Morris J. Kerrigan Associates are looking for factual and surveillance investigators, licensed factual and surveillance investigators, Melbourne and in regional Victorian areas. So Kerrigans that have been around now for, crikey, must be at least 30 years. They're a national investigation agency, and they want you, if you're in Victoria, to get in touch with them, send your resume, send a copy of your licence, send a cover letter. They do personal injury claims, workers' compensation, compulsory third-party claims to the TAC, and public liability matters. Now, it's not just limited to that. They also do general insurance work. So they're seeking people who hold a Victorian security licence as an investigator and you're currently working. You must have a minimum of 12 months insurance investigation. You must possess your own equipment, including a motor vehicle, laptop, computer, printer, digital camera and video. Now that's a portable printer they want you to have so you can type your statements and print them on the spot. You must have excellent grammar and reporting skills. Well, your PC or your laptop's going to be doing that for you today, so it's doing 95% of that work. When I used to work for Kerrigans, I used to handwrite my statements. That's how long ago it was. And it was a nightmare, especially when you got a fussy old ex-school teacher who was one of the witnesses. They'd go through and correct all your statement spelling mistakes and grammatical errors before they'd sign it. So these days with the laptops, much easier just to cut and paste or to delete and repair, then print it out so they can sign it on the spot. You must have for Kerrigans, like any other investigation agency, excellent time management skills. And you should be able to demonstrate an understanding of compulsory third-party investigations, public liability investigations, workers' compensation investigations, and general insurance investigations. Now, this is really important because if you understand all of those things, if you understand all of those types of investigations, number one, it means you're an Australian Security Academy graduate student because you learnt those in your course. Number two, they are the requirement for the new Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, the CPP 30619. All the assessments in that qualification say you must know how to do a public liability investigation, CTP motor vehicle accident investigation, workers' compensation, personal injury or psychological injury investigation. So Kerrigans are only asking for what you learnt in your course. Now, if you didn't learn those things in your course, why did you do that course? If they didn't have it, if they didn't teach you how to do statements or introduce you to those concepts and show you how to do the investigations, the expectation of the employer is that you'll have the ability to do all those investigations, and you will be able to go to James at Kerrigans and say, look, here's an example of a report I wrote for workers' compensation, James. Here's an example of some witness statements I took for CTP liability for transport accident. They're simulated, they're not real, but this is how I was learnt to do them. And if you've got your 12 months experience and you've got those to show them, and if you've got the ability to work to tight deadlines like they require, because all their investigations have got to be back in 14 days from the day you receive them through your case management system, and you learnt that in your course at the Australian Security Academy, you've got a very good chance of getting that job. So get on to Kerrigans, apply for them. They're advertised on Seek this week for factual and surveillance investigators. Now, if you're going to be a surveillance investigator, you've got to play nicely with others. If you join a Facebook group that just plays down the industry, bitches about everybody else and the employers, and you're there liking those comments and you're there making those comments, Kerrigans won't touch you. Neither will M&A investigations, neither will any other major employer in Australia. You've got a lot to bitch about because you'll never get any work. So don't get involved with those types of things on social networking. Stay out of it. Guarantee your career by going out there and working, not sitting on Facebook and moaning and complaining like people that are never going to get a job because they did the wrong course or they're just the wrong type of person to be in this industry. So there's a lot happening out there this week. A lawyer on the Gold Coast got his window tinting wrong. Surveillance investigators, don't you do that. A man in Hobart was jailed for 4 years. He'll serve 2 years of that for 3 counts of insurance fraud. That's general insurance fraud, home and contents, and M&A investigations and Kerrigans are looking for investigators. So that's our week here at the Australian Security Academy. I hope you've enjoyed it today. If you did, give it a like. I'll see you next week when I tell you what happened during the week next week. And don't forget, down in Victoria, we've got our ING meeting coming up on the 17th of March.